Today I'm talking about social dynamics within the workplace and how I, as an autistic person, have really struggled with them. So I have quite a lot of experience with different kinds of workplaces because I've done another video on this, but I've had over 50 jobs in my lifetime, which is quite a lot. And although I've worked in quite different kinds of workplaces, they all have a lot of similarities in many ways, in that social dynamics has been a massive area that I've struggled with. So, first up, I'm going to talk about hierarchies within the workplace. Hierarchies have always just really kind of confused me throughout my working life, really, because I've just never really kind of gotten on with them at all, really. The very fact that some people are supposed to have kind of more importance or be more significant than others just, sits quite uncomfortably with me, really. And I think through this, it's just made me sort of quite paranoid around bosses because I've just never really known how to treat them. And yeah, it's just caused me a lot of anxiety, I have to say. I just don't seem as relaxed about the whole kind of hierarchical structure as other colleagues seem to have been, really. Yeah, I've just struggled with them. And I think because of this, I've just always found the relationship between me as a worker and my boss, whoever it's been at the time, just really difficult to kind of understand, really. And it's led to me over worrying about situations. For instance, if I've known that I've got a one-to-one meeting coming up at any stage, I'll just worry about it for so long. And I've just always had a sense of being in trouble at work. Even when, my fears are completely unfounded, i.e., the majority of the time, I've just always worried that my boss was going to catch me out with something, or I'd be sacked, or whatever, really. But my brain would just kind of conjure up all of these scenarios, and it would very often lead to me having very little downtime, in the sense of just forgetting about work. So very often I'd leave work on a Friday and I'd be panicking about what Monday would have to bring over the whole duration of the weekend, really. So yeah, it's something that I've just always really, really struggled with. And now that I know that I'm autistic, I can see how transitions, or my difficulties with transitions, really plays into this, really, because I know that whenever I'd have, say, a one-to-one meeting with a boss, the atmosphere would feel really quite charged, very professional, and yeah, quite difficult in many ways. And then we'd leave the office and go back out into the wider office, and we'd have to, change our behaviours slightly and be more informal, more relaxed around other people. And, I don't know if this will make a lot of sense, but I just found the transition from going from a really formal environment into something that was more relaxed, and vice versa, really quite difficult, because it would mean that I'd have to change my behaviour. And as a high masking autistic person, it's just it's like your brain has to do a constant dance around the circumstances that you have kind of in front of you, really. So yeah, I just found transitions in that sense really difficult. So one thing that I really struggle with in the workplace is small talk. And gosh, it's just such a waste of time, isn't it? But it plays such a part in office dynamics and office politics, because you have to do it, really, to get ahead, don't you? You have to be able to show willing with your colleagues, to be able to talk to them, to be able to relate with them. But when small talk doesn't come kind of naturally to you, it's really difficult. I really don't like small talk, if I'm honest, but I think because I've had so much practice at it in all of the workplaces that I've been in, that I know that I can do it. I can ask all the nonsense questions, if you like, such as, how are you? Isn't it rainy today? All that jazz. I've lots of experience in doing all of this kind of small talk stuff, but once you've used up all of your go-to questions and you have to think kind of more creatively, really, yeah, that's the area I really struggle in. And very often I'd make excuses that I'd have to go off and do another thing, or I'd need the loo. And yeah, it just gives me such anxiety because I feel like I'm responsible for carrying on the whole conversation. It's like I'm not wholly aware of the other person having their own autonomy and their own responsibility for bearing parts of the responsibility for the conversation. It's almost like I feel like I have to do all of the talking, and with that comes a whole lot of stress because talking to people doesn't come naturally to me at all. It's just something that I've learned through masking, really. Next up, workplace gossip. And when we're thinking about communication with our colleagues, in very many workplaces, social cliques develop, don't they? And they again are really hard to work out as to who's friends with who, and yeah, who you need to perhaps be more careful with, and all of that jazz, really. I find it just so hard to deal with, really. And with that, all the kind of workplace or office gossip thing is a massive issue in basically every workplace I've been in. I don't know about you, but it's something that I've been really mindful about. I had a terrible experience with gossip as a schoolgirl, and I've done a separate video about that. And as a result, I'm really quite paranoid about office gossip, and I've always avoided it. I'm just not interested in that kind of stuff. And I remember in one workplace, this woman was constantly bitch about everybody else, and in particular the boss. And I would just let it kind of ride over me. I would not respond at all, in the hope that she'd get the message that I, just wasn't interested in any of this stuff. I'm, just not a gossipy kind of person. But there was one day when the boss actually walked in, and she was bitching about him to me, and he would have heard what was going on. And I was absolutely paranoid that he might think that I was engaged in this conversation, so it was a two-way thing, and it really bothered me. And I just hope he knew that I wasn't that kind of person. But I just hate all of that stuff. I just cannot get why people have to do it, unless of course you are working for somebody really awful and you have to essentially talk about them to another person to get whatever off your chest. But as a rule, I just don't get the whole office gossip thing. It really, really bothers me. And interestingly, as a result of not being a gossipy person, it's been really weird that people have seen me as like a really trustworthy kind of source, and they just kind of tell me whatever their thoughts were and their secrets and stuff. And yeah, I just found it fascinating because I thought, I'm just somebody at work. I don't know why you're telling me this personal stuff, really. Yeah, just interesting, isn't it? Also, whenever I've had responsibility for other staff members, which actually hasn't happened too much in my life, thankfully, but there has been one or two occasions where I have had responsibility for other staff members, um, in the form mainly of training, but I have been, I think, a line manager once, and it absolutely does not come naturally to me, and it makes me really uncomfortable. And when I think about when I've had to train other staff members, I really don't like it at all. I've got a thing about public speaking, and I really struggle with it to the point of being quite phobic about it. And I know that training a staff member isn't public speaking, but for me, there are some similarities. You know, you're kind of being perceived. The other person is really listening to what you're saying, and for me, there's often a sense of judgment about it, and all of this does not sit comfortably with me. And it's almost like I leave my body and I'm looking down at myself and judging myself, and very often hating myself while I'm doing all of this. And I'm just very aware of what I'm saying all the time, and it really is uncomfortable. And I know that when I've had responsibility for other people, I just, oh my God, struggle with it so much, because I have real problems with letting go of tasks that I'm responsible for, essentially. So if I'm trying to hand work over, I find it really difficult, because I know that if I'm responsible for the task still through that other person, so if I'm, you know, the line manager for this whole kind of procedure, I worry that I'm not going to relay my thoughts properly, so they're not going to be trained properly. So I may as well do the task at hand anyway, so that I know it's going to be done. And I know this is a real problem, you know, and this is where I've struggled with line management, and it's, you know, certainly why I've never really done it, because I can't do it, if I'm honest. I find it really difficult. I just find it really difficult in letting go of stuff and passing on responsibility to other people. And there's one area of social dynamics I will just never get at all. And we all know about banter at work, don't we? And it's something that many autistic people struggle with, because much of it is rooted in kind of teasing people, isn't it? And I hate all of that. But another area of social dynamics that I really hate and I do not get whatsoever is flirtatious banter. And I just really struggle with that. I don't know why people do it. I've just never understood it, and it's something that I have never done, because firstly, I just wouldn't know how to do it, if I'm honest. It's completely alien to me. But I think because of this lack of understanding, or this lack of partaking in flirtatious banter, it's led to some people not understanding me or what I'm about at all. And in a few instances, I've been called gay, and that's been by colleagues and by a boss as well. And I couldn't be bothered even responding to them, because as far as I'm concerned, being gay is nothing to be embarrassed about. So I just let them believe what they wanted to believe. But I was just flabbergasted that they thought this was acceptable behaviour, really. And this is going back kind of 20 years or so, thankfully. I'd be absolutely horrified to hear of this kind of banter is still going on in various workplaces out there. And looking back now, I can certainly see that they knew that there was something different about me, but they couldn't ascertain exactly what it was. So that was the easiest thing that they could think of. So yeah, and hence why I never challenged it, because I never saw it as anything to be ashamed of, really. It's just that they were incorrect. Next up, I'm going to talk about friendships within the workplace, because this has been the area that I've probably struggled in most, in trying to determine when a colleague becomes a friend, and if indeed it is possible for a colleague to become a friend. And like many people of a similar age to me, I'm 50 now, I've met quite a number of people who I would have called friends at that time through my life at work. And pre-internet, this was a pretty common way, I'd say, to meet friends, and I think it was the number one way actually to meet romantic partners before the internet. So, it was a kind of common thing to do. And I found that most of my friendships through work often lasted the duration of the time that I was at that particular workplace. So it was really a friendship of circumstances, if you like. So I found that once I'd leave any particular workplace, then very often that friendship would come to an end as well. And yeah, that was pretty standard, I'd say, throughout my life. But there have been a handful of people that my friendship continued, once I finished working within the workplace, but not very many at all. So when I was younger, these friendships of circumstances used to work out actually quite well for me, because I would struggle in making friends. But if you're, kind of spending a lot of time with people, then you're more inclined to maybe want to socialize with them if you've got at least a few things in common. And I remember in one place in particular, it was a petrol station. I became friends with one girl and one guy, and we'd often kind of go out drinking. So we'd go to bars and maybe nightclubs as well. And I have to say that kind of really worked out for me, because I didn't have any other friendships going on. So yeah, it was a good thing in many ways as a young person, certainly. However, as I entered my 30s, friendships at work became rather complicated. So I'm thinking of one friend of circumstances in particular who became my boss while I was working there. So essentially, we both started off doing the same job. I was brought in later, so we were colleagues for a while of the same level, and we got on pretty well, I have to say, in the early days. We seemed to have some things in common, and it wasn't long before we started socialising here and there outside of the workplace. And she did strike me as somebody who was maybe a little bit needy in the early days, but yeah, I didn't really pay any heed to that, because she seems very nice. But it wasn't long after that she was promoted, so she was now my boss, and she was also manager to a few others within the office. And I just found that the longer this relationship went on, so the relationship of her being my superior, the more kind of complicated and at times awkward it got. And because of this whole shift in dynamic, I guess I started to pull away from her. So I'd kind of, avoid seeing her socially and, all this stuff, because it was becoming just so different at work, and I just couldn't work out our relationship, if you like. And I do wonder if, she felt similarly as well. But I just found that the longer this relationship went on, the more kind of weird she was with me. And in the end, she was micromanaging me to the point where it felt like bullying, really. Like, she'd sometimes have issues with my timekeeping, but I always got to work in good time, really. It's just that instead of arriving early, as I did beforehand, I now would turn up to work on time. Also, if she felt that I was spending too long in the loo, or if I was spending too long chatting to another colleague while I was making a cup of tea or something like that, she would make an absolute beeline for me. Editing Lizzie here. I should add that my behaviour was no different to that of any of my colleagues, really. It's just that I was singled out, and this was actually noticed by some of my colleagues as well. So I just need to say that for the purposes of this video. And because my confidence was at an all-time low at this point, I just didn't have the confidence, really. I just didn't have it in me to approach HR with any of these issues, really, because I just thought I'd be, I don't know, accused of being a drama queen, or I don't know, making it up or whatever. And I think when you're in a state of kind of depression like this, the very act of making a complaint is just, way too out there, isn't it? It takes all of your kind of mental rigor um, to be able to push forward with any complaint like that, and I just wasn't able to. So in the end, I handed in my notice because that was the only option I had available to me, and my own mental health, really. And I didn't have a job to go to. And in hindsight, it was probably good that I didn't have a job to go to, because I'd reached the stage of absolute burnout. I think through this constant micromanaging, it just got me into such a state of paranoia, really. I just, yeah, really struggled, I have to say. And it's probably one of the most difficult times I've had as a result of, yeah, social dynamics within the workplace. Another friendship that I had in the workplace, and again, it was a friendship of circumstance, was with another woman, and we started socializing and we got on really well. She was really funny, intelligent, and yeah, in the early days, I really enjoyed spending time with her. But as time went on, it was very clear to me that she wanted more from me than I was able to give. And it all started in the form of a phone call. And this phone call would have seemed really innocuous to anybody else, because she was being really pleasant on the call and just asking me, I think, about my day, maybe what she was watching on TV. And I remember thinking during that phone call, she's going to get to the point in a minute of why she's calling. But that point never came. And yeah, I just remember feeling really confused as to why she'd called, when it was nothing but, just random stuff that was happening to her as a result of her day. And soon after that, I started having similar phone calls from this woman, and it got to the point where I just pulled the phone out of the socket. It was 20 years ago, so it was a landline, but I remember feeling real anxiety every day that the phone might ring and it might be this woman and she'd just want to talk about kind of nothing, really. And now that I know I'm autistic, I can absolutely understand why. Many autistic people really can't get on with the phone, and I'm certainly one of them, but only when it comes to kind of friendships and stuff. I really struggle with talking to friends over the phone. So it's only now that I can recognise why on earth I was having such problems with this. And as with the other example person, I just really started to drastically pull back from our friendship, because I couldn't give her what she wanted, basically, and I couldn't live up to her expectations of a friendship. So the friendship came to an end. So I think now, looking back at all of my work experiences, I can really see in what kind of situation I would work best. And it's definitely working on my own. I think looking back at some temp positions, I'd be assigned a task that would involve me working on my own within an office, and have very little interaction with other people. And for me, I was always really happy in these kinds of roles. It would often be boring work, of course, but I was cool with it, really. I just felt that I worked best alone, away from people, and certainly away from phones. And and also I've been working as a freelance artist from home over the last 10 years, and very often it's been on a part-time basis. I've also been doing temp work here and there along with some other part-time roles, but I just really enjoy working from home. I just really like being on my own, being in an environment that I feel comfortable and safe in. And I just wish that this was something that could be explored more for autistic people going forwards in society. We know that very many autistic people work far better on their own and away from other people, away from kind of sensory challenges as well. And I really hope to see that this is explored far more in the future for autistic and neurodivergent people, because we deserve opportunities to flourish. So these have been some of my experiences in regard to social dynamics in the workplace, and apologies if it's been a bit rambly here and there or a bit disparate. It's just trying to bring lots of different pieces of information together in one video. So I hope it makes sense, but I would love to know if there's anything that's really relatable for you in this video. And I'd also love to hear about your own examples of having difficulties with social dynamics in the workplace. It's probably best if you kind of keep things anonymous if you're talking about other people within the workplace. You know, it is a public space, so it's something just to be mindful. But yeah, I think it's just a really interesting topic, isn't it? And I'd also love to hear ways that you think things can be improved for autistic people going forwards, because we know that very many areas could and should be improved for us. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your ideas down below. So, I think that's going to be it for today. So, thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.